Good morning. I'm happy to have this morning Håkan Hardenberger, world famous trumpet virtuoso, on. And Håkan, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Very nice to see you. Good
Great.
morning. It's still morning here. Just one more minute is morning here.
Definitely morning here. So, Håkan, it's well known who your teachers were: Bo Nilsson, Pierre Thibaud, Thomas Stevens. I wanted to ask you two questions. The first is, could you talk about the characteristics of these gentlemen as far as teachers? And I think it's also well known that especially Thibaud and Tom could be a little strict. But could you talk about some of the warmer sides of these three gentlemen as well?
Well, the warmer sides were definitely the predominant ones. You know, it often the stories that last are the more eccentric ones, and they were for sure, all three of them, in the best sense of the word, madmen, as we are with the trumpet. I think you probably have to be to survive the challenge of this instrument, and they were very demanding. And I mean, already with Bo, my first lessons would last for 1.5 hours when I was an 8-year-old kid, and the other two, they just took it from there. You know, they were so giving and generous with their knowledge, but also then demanding. And I guess they found in me someone who reacted positively to those demands. I mean, it was like I couldn't get enough food. I was very, very hungry for all their words and all their experience, and I was asking questions, and I really, they offered something complete from as human beings also.
Right.
You know, very much so.
When you describe those lessons with Boo that were 1.5 hours as an 8-year-old kid, do you have memories of how he started you and what kind of things put you on the right path from the beginning?
Well, I have quite many memories, actually. I mean, I remember the first lesson quite vividly, because he started off with him on just playing notes on the piano and checking if I had any ears at all. And then I can't really remember how he made me make the first noise, but I think I had already, you know, for about a month tried to make a sound in the trumpet. So I don't know, but what I can detect from a little book where he wrote exercises, I can see that he started me off and what I would think unusually high in the test. You know, it was on the B flat trumpet an E, you know, and then going down, slurs going down, which seems to be have been a clever way. And I know that integrating the breath into the production of the sound was very important from first start, because there was a sign on the first page of the book, you know, circle with an arrow at the end. So, and I remember him saying, never ever break that circle for any reason at all. And then, you know, I've developed it myself later, and not breaking it and being able to do a quick circle, a slow circle, and whatever, but always that the breath is what creates the quality of the sound.
Yes. And when you were with Pierre Thibaud, I know he was a very, always a student of the trumpet, learning about Caruso and Stamp later. Can you talk about some of those things when he was maybe in his early days of discovering some of those things and how those helped you, especially in terms of strength and technique?
Well, with the foundation I had from Bo, I was a very, you know, I was very lucky, because I came to Paris as a very healthy trumpet player. You know, I could play. Flow was not a problem. Centering was not a problem. I was not a very, very strong player. You know, I could play up to a high C, but I played also. The fashion in those days was that, you know, because Herseth was playing a 1C, everybody thought they should be playing a 1C. I wasn't quite playing a 1C, but I was playing something that maybe was a material that was maybe slightly too large, but I was making a good sound. And then we started to work. I mean, I realized that he didn't have to tell me. I realized that I couldn't play the Brandenburger. I couldn't, you know. So I just worked hard on that, and in what he was saying, and in what we tried, and what he tried on himself, like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You know, you know, the Caruso was definitely one of those things, and then I made my version that worked for me, where I could see that I got efficiency out of, and for what I wanted and what I needed in my playing. I think this is where they were all very important, because they made me think, you know, rather than just swallow. Think what's the purpose of, what am I looking for, what do I want in my sound, what do I want, and then work for that. And that's something I see in students, the students that have that gift, where you can detect from the question that they are after something particular. Then you know you're on a very, very good track, because there will be a fruitful connection between teacher and student like that.
And while we're traveling through these teachers a little bit, can you talk a little bit about Tom and how he developed all the things that had come before? I know there was a lot of transposition and musicianship lessons from him. Can you kind of give just an idea of what that would be like?
Yes, it was almost more about thinking than. I mean, I could definitely play by that time. When I met him early on, I met him very, very early on at Jean-Pierre Mattei's wonderful summer gatherings with Thibaud and Stamp. So it was already a, you know, I had met many people, but they were people I connected with, and I understood, and they understood me, and I made progress when I listened to what they said. So I had met him very early on, but when we started to work for real together, it was all about text. Yeah. And getting understanding of the text, and getting out of the understanding control, because I had the misconception about him that, you know, he must be doing yoga or meditation or taking some strange drugs or something, because of the sense of control of the instrument that he projected. So, but that was total misunderstanding, that the whole control came from understanding of the text and actual rules, you know, what he talks about as the Vacchiano rules. And then, you know, very interesting historic tracing of I mean, it's classic thinking. It's classic hierarchic method of thinking, like the Greek, and, you know, it's just applied to music, and that the knowledge that previous generations have gathered, that we do something with it and not just throw it away, you know, would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be very nice. And you gave, yeah, it would be very, very nice. And you just gave me the perfect segue, because one thing I wanted to ask you was about three gentlemen of the previous generation. If you could just give a few words to speak to them and their influence on your mind and your playing. The first would be, of course, Edvard Tarr, who would have been 85 this year. If you could speak about his influence on you and the trumpet world in general.
Well, again, you know, thanks to Bo, who was very curious. And I mean, there we were in the small town of Sweden. And by the time I was 10, I had already met Ed, because Bo was playing in his ensemble. Mm-hmm. And I think that for a while, I was going to go on that train with the early music and the natural trumpet and all that. But Bo also, I mean, he went to Chicago, and there was a lot of curiosity there. But with Ed, I also had all these long discussions. Ed was always on the juries for international competition, and he was on, I think he came to there was a chorus organized in Norway when Herset famously came to Europe for one of the first time to give a week-long class, and Ed was there as well. And there's actually a famous photo of the three of us playing Heldenleben. The only time I ever played Heldenleben, by the way. But with Ed, it was the discussions. I think somewhere around that time with Heldenleben in Norway, he probably, sorry,
It's
calling the musicians. Around that time, I probably tasted whiskey for the first time, and I would have been with Ed, not a lot, we would talk a lot about philosophical things and where the trumpet, and of course, now being here in Hamburg, where the Zimmermann was actually premiered, commissioned by the NDR Orchestra in 1954. Ed was the one who gave me the trumpet part of that when I was still in Paris. So without Ed, who knows how ignorant I would have remained.
Yeah.
There we were thinking that the Haydn was the only real masterpiece we had.
Right.
I mean, pieces that can attract the attention of great conductors, great orchestras. And there was the Zimmermann that had been lying there for 30 years almost without anyone playing it, or almost. And so that was a very, very important thing that Ed did for me. And then, I would always keep contact with him, although, I wouldn't say that I was one of his students. I played for him now and again when I first wanted to play the Michael Haydn C major, and for style and discussion and talking to him about style and things, very important.
The next name that would come up would be Timothy Dockschitzer.
Yes, well, I met him. I can't remember the exact year of you could check that out, the Montreux International. Oh, I wish these musicians would go on stage so Bell would stop. Anyway, the first international Montreux Brass Conference, which was jointly organized by the International Trumpet Guild, Horn Society, Trombone Association, and I think almost everyone was there. It was an incredible gathering of people, and I typically Bo, he said, "Oh yes, you have to go there," and then I'll organize a hotel room, he said. And then I took a plane from Copenhagen, my parents anxiously saying goodbye. And luckily on that plane, there was a lot of brass players from Stockholm. So I immediately made sort of older friends, because when I came to Montreux, there was no hotel room and organized. But I didn't care. I got to meet all these great players. Dave Hickman was there. I mean, and Barry Tuckwell was there, and there was Dockschitzer, accompanied by someone from who was officially a translator. Yes, yeah, and being me, I had no fear in going up at some point asking for a little lesson, which nobody else dared to do. So I think I was probably the only one having a lesson with Dockschitzer, a short one. I played a little bit of Hummel to him. Yeah.
Do you remember any of his comments or mannerisms or anything?
Well, actually, I mean, he was very complimentary, but he said that I had a huge problem in that my neck, it was expanding like this when I was playing.
Mm-hmm.
And that absolutely had to stop. Otherwise, I would never play correctly. So I was very, very worried. And I think it must have been then the following summer that I saw Tom
Hmm.
at Moudon. And I told him the story. I said, well, Dashitzer says that if I don't stop this, I can't. And I can't. I don't know how to stop it. I don't know. I really don't know how to stop it. Tom said, that's no trouble at all. You know, as long as you're not expanding in front here, this is just, you'll get stronger. And if you would have any big problem, we'll send you to Arnold Jacobs in Chicago. He said, and just the words comforted me and relaxed me. And I'm sure Dr. Schütze didn't mean any. There was
Right.
nothing. And then I had a second wonderful meeting with him many years later, where I played a concert in Vilnius, and I played the Tamberg, which is one of his pieces, and he organized a dinner at a restaurant, and very generously and wonderful. Yes.
So the last person I would ask about is Maurice Andre, of course.
Yes, Maurice was, of course, the other teacher in Paris, and a very friendly one. And the relation between Thibaud and Maurice was, to my knowledge, a good one. As students, we were also friendly. I have a lot of still friends from that class, and actually the acting teacher was more Marcel Lagorce, because Maurice was hardly ever there. He was out touring. So Lagorce was the one we would see, and after the classes at the corner Café de l'Europe, listening to Thibaud and Lagorce discussing trumpet, conductors, music, life. Those were incredible moments, and they would last as long as the class. I mean, it was really fantastic. I learned so much just by being near them and listening and hearing them talk. But Maurice, of course, there was this competition arranged, Maurice Andre International Competition, where I accidentally made it to the finals. And that's when I got to meet him a little bit. He was, of course, since I started playing the trumpet, a huge influence, because he was the soloist. I didn't think of at first that I could do anything like that, and I also understood quickly that if I was going to do something in that direction, he was in one time. He was a product of a certain time, mm-hmm. And I would need to be a product of another time. Not that I disliked what he was doing, but I knew I was another person, of course, and I would have other aesthetics maybe, and also, as we know, with Ed, the whole movement of national trumpet, the way we think about Baroque music had started to change, and also I understood that maybe my vocation was to find, real masterpieces for the trumpet and real big stories, long stories to tell, and one of those long and complex stories is, of course, Gruber's Ariel, a magnificent trumpet concerto that I think I've played now over 100 times, and I remember playing that in Paris, one of the early performances with the Orchestre National at the famous Théâtre Champs-Élysées, where the venue of Scandals, where The Rite of Spring was famously premiered, and I think also the Ballet Mécanique. But anyway, a place of scandal. So outside, I was told after, I'm very proud of this, if it's true, I really hope it's true, because I was told that afterwards the two classes, the André and Thibaud class, they sort of meet out on the pavement outside the theater, and then they discuss this strange music and what I'd managed to do or not, and then someone of the opposite camp says, well, it's all right for him. Nobody knows this piece, so he can play whatever. And out of the bunch comes a fist, and then apparently there is at least a small fight. And I really hope this is true. I really
hope. Was there a recording as a student that you wore out, that you listened to all the time? Just one thing that you could not get away from?
No, I wouldn't say. There was. I listened a lot to many things, and I mean, I listened to. First of all, I listened to a lot of non-trumpet players. Maybe even more than I listened to, and still do, to trumpet players. Then I listened a lot to jazz players.
Yes.
But also in the classic ones, I listened to, I mean, people like Don Smithers. People who don't know Don Smithers should check out his old Telemann, for instance. And I listened to Ed and Doc Schitzer and Maurice and Thibaud and many people. And there would always be little moments of things that I would hear, and I would think, my God. I mean, there's one in Maurice recording of the Jolivet 2, the second concerto, which is, well, anyway, in the middle of the second movement, it goes to it. There's an F sharp, mid-range F sharp, and it's just the quality of that note. It's such unbelievable. He's not playing loud. It's soft. It still has this resonance and center, and the way he slurs into it, and then the way he leaves it. I mean, just a little tiny bit like that can be incredible inspiration. Something I've actually noticed, I have a lot of painter friends, and when they look at paintings of either old masters or colleagues, or they will see, of course, the big picture of if it gives them an impression or not. I mean, that's the first thing. If you don't have some emotional, then you won't be interested. But once you're interested, they will go close to the painting and they'll say, look at that little corner there, how the light or whatever, or that, why does that happen? And I think this is the true nerd, but I really honestly think that those tiny little moments are the decisive ones.
Who were the non-trumpet players that you focused on listening to?
Well, the early ones were Jussi Björling, Swedish tenor, Heifetz, violin. I mean, very early on, and then ongoing. I mean, there's so many wonderful musicians around. I think it's dangerous to have only one idol. One should have many. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about the trumpet playing itself now. Can you talk about your first practice session that you do in the day now, and maybe how that's evolved a little bit over time?
Oh, I don't know that it has. Sad case, maybe. No, I don't know. I mean, I base my playing on centering, and to do that, the production has to be correct first. So I always start with some bending notes and some slow chromatic scales, not difficult, really just focusing on vibration, and then slowly letting more air into the picture, and then having a round, nice centered sound like that F sharp in in Maurice Ravel, and that a sound that resonates and where there's not any unnecessary tension anywhere, and then just adding disciplines to that, you know, bigger and bigger intervals, more and more dynamics, and listening all the time. I mean, I still try to listen to myself. If it's, you know, if it's fine and it's going well, or if it's not a very important day, I might be doing other things while I warm up.
Yeah.
But as soon as as soon as there's a warning lamp in the cockpit, you know, then I will really work on presence, you know, on being there in my sound, and being, you know, I guess a sort of Zen approach to it. But I can go in and out of that depending on what's needed. I like both. I like the detachment sometimes, and then I also like totally being in it. And of course, a concert day, I don't read the newspaper while I warm up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And could you describe to people what you think of as an efficient practice session? Because as you know, a lot of students or professionals, sometimes maybe we do too much or too little. Can you kind of talk about what makes an efficient practice session where you feel like you've gotten a lot done?
Well, you're not talking about warm up anymore, I
No,
guess.
not talking about warming, just like
No, I mean, I have the most luxurious life in that respect, because I can practice as much as I want most days, and also I can warm up if I'm early enough, which I most often are. I'm the first one at the hall usually, and because I like to spend time, or like to be able to spend time if needed. I want to feel well when I play. No, I think efficient practice is vital. Whether it's in your warm up. I mean, when I was a kid, and I wanted to play a little trumpet before I went to school. So of course I did the Shikovitz little things, you know, for about 15 minutes instead of having breakfast, which put my mother slightly off. But you know, that was the perfect efficiency then. And now efficiency is to get my playing up to where it needs to be to play at Zimmerman, and that of course involves a balance between flexibility and strength and all these matters that we work with. And then when it comes to working on music, on pieces, it's very, very different if you're taking a piece that you know or have played many times. You should still be curious with one of those pieces, you know, so you need to be really there and still find a lot of food for your thoughts, that can give you ideas, and then work for the ideas to come out. I mean, I work, I've said many times, I work slowly and softly, and try to let the ideas come to me. Certainly, very often I can't copy. If it's a new piece, you know, there's nothing to copy. And then forming what I want to do, and then I need to still be flexible, to be open to when I hear a great oboist in the orchestra playing something that I will answer. I need to be not stuck in a corner with, you know, some issue of difficulty or whatever it is. So efficiency it's a huge area. I usually try to separate. I tell students to try to separate performance and practice. I mean, that's rule number one in efficiency, because if you perform to yourself or to your neighbor when you practice, you're fooling yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you then, while performing, think, oh well, I should have done like that, or I need to control this. Like I need to do this for this to happen. It's too late. You know, I mean, everything is theory. We end up in a gray zone with
Yes.
those. You know, even I can't claim that I always succeed in separating those two things, but it's a very good ambition.
Yes. Yes. Well, speaking of familiar pieces and revisiting them, you've done that a little bit over the pandemic with the Charliers, which I think every trumpet player on earth has been very grateful to you for doing that, because it's been an inspiration, and I think it's probably inspired a lot of people to practice those etudes again in maybe a little bit different way. I wondered if you might talk about, is this had been sort of a rediscovery because you were going to record them, and did you get more, find new things in them that you did not notice maybe in the past?
I mean, they are very good music, so there will be things to discover if you've played them. You know, I mean, those are pieces. They have been with me. They were always pieces I would take up after I had a longer break or something like that. I mean, they are very good to make you keep in shape, and they were a lifesaver. It was one of the best ideas I've had. I mean, it was totally egotistical when and then they were very kind at Malmo Live to let me go there and do it, so I could play in a hall, which is very different to play in your studio, and then to present it in a professional way. Um, and yes, they even the ones that we have played a lot, there were things too. He is a master of notation,
Yes.
and for the trumpet, and actually they are also useful to composers, um, especially if they see the text, what he has written, and what then happens. And I mean, honestly, I was hoping, of course, that the pandemic would be over in 4 or 8 weeks. So like everybody else, the ones in the beginning I played more, but Thibaud was very clever. He knew that.
Yes.
He knew that most people don't get past number two, so he made us do every week two etudes, and he would take the first and the last, and the second and the second last, and that was very good. And the order in the book is not the original order. I'm sure that Charlier had a more methodic way, for instance, building the intervals up, and so this was an editorial thing.
Yes. Yes. Have you finished? How many more do you have to go?
I think we just recorded number 25.
Okay.
And now, I mean, now honestly, I have so much to do. I will finish them one day, but it will have to be at the pace that's allowing, because I want to spend the time that I've been doing with them to really look under each layer a little bit more,
Yeah.
and to free myself. I mean, I hadn't played the number 25. I hadn't played for many, many, many years,
Yes.
and I totally admit to having last time treated it as an exercise, and I thought when I saw it, oh, that's a boring old one, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
I mean, and I've been trying to take the approach that how would one of my colleague pianists or violinists, how would they play this? What does it mean to be alone
Yes.
and make real music? Some people gives me thumbs down and say that I don't play, like a metronome. I don't want to play like a metronome.
Right. Right.
We can, all exercises can be used in many ways.
Yes.
You can, but if you use them to make music, then that's the purpose.
Yes. Definitely, many of those recordings sound like the way a violinist or a pianist would approach them. And I think that's almost revolutionary to trumpet players. So sometimes maybe they're not as used to it.
Well, we are put in our, because we we can only play one note at a time.
Hmm.
We play an instrument that's very directional. We very often, like Tom pointed out to me, we have no idea what that direction does to phrasing, how certain notes cover other notes up. We are used to being told what to do.
That's true.
By conductors and others, and having to relate to 2 or 3 more colleagues playing with us, and I mean, I played a lot of chamber music. I know that you can do, if you are clear in your intentions and you apply normal rules. Playing freely does not mean that you disrespect musical rules. On the contrary, you use them and you are clear to others in how you use them. Then you can make chamber music, and even I would claim that you can play in an orchestra like that. And the best orchestras, that's what they do. They play a certain rhythm or a certain phrasing so clearly with intention that their colleagues pick it up, and then you have a wonderful. So how you play when you're on your own will affect how you play with others.
Excellent. And I know we talked once before, and I asked you if you had ever thought about recording an album of Etudes. Is that ever something to think about?
No, I don't. I'm not going to go through the Charliers again. It will be, once they're collected. I don't know. It's nothing I've earned any money doing. So we'll see what we do with them. Collect them somehow. I think that, one of the most touching moments was there was these 2 New Zealand kids where the teacher had made a two voice version of the beginning of the second etude. That was a moment where I felt that I'd made some difference. That was very heartwarming.
Yes.
So if I can do that, and I wish that people. Number 2 is really wonderful. I agree, but I also wish that people would dig deeper into the other ones, and the pleasure of doing that, and to discover what music, how it works.
when you're about to play, shifting to some of the newer pieces that you've worked on, Gruber, Parrots, Violin, etc. When you're going on stage for the first time, especially some of these more challenging pieces, can you describe that feeling and what's going through your mind the first time you play these pieces?
No. I mean, this is no, I really can't.
Okay.
Because I mean, it's like a war of doubt and self-confidence and there's so much you want to come out, and there's so much you want to happen, and then it's not in your hands anymore, and you have to throw yourself out there, and you still have to be in control. Very often I end up just prioritizing one thing, like keep breathing. and then also knowing, I mean, that's my experience, that the first time I play a piece, there's going to be bits that are not, what I want them to be. And actually, when I play the piece 100 times, there's going to be bits that are not. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things of music making, is that we want it to be perfect. Of course, there's a ambition, there's a beauty in that ambition, but yes, we must be careful that it doesn't put a big blanket over the whole thing. It's a strange thing, this thrive for perfection, because we all very often we get closest to it when we manage to throw everything away, or like Harrison Ford, in the, what's it called, The Fugitive, when he throws himself out. I mean, that's often the feeling, to try to leave the controlling part of yourself enough.
Yes.
Still there, but enough.
Yes. And speaking of composers, can you talk a little bit about the qualities that attract you to a composer, especially if you're trying to get a piece from them?
Yes, I mean, I listen to their music, and if it really speaks to me, I don't know if I mean, they're very different. The first major piece that I still played not so long ago, the virtuoso, Endless Parade. You couldn't say that it's melodic, or I mean, it's hugely rhythmical.
Yes.
And actually, it is melodical in one way. It's not it's not something, but it is thematic. They're all phrases, and I think music for me needs to relate to time and to pitch, but it can relate to pitch in different ways. I can find, there's some intervals are more expressive than others, and and they can be expressive in different ways.
Yes. Yes.
Not always just being in, it's not the harmony itself.
Yes.
So time and pitch I like to relate to, but composers are very different. The trumpet is interesting because once you start working with a composer, there's something so honest with the trumpet that the most successful pieces, they've turned out to be quite personal for the composer.
Yes.
As well. There's something so human in the trumpet and the nakedness of the trumpet, if you like, that brings out almost autobiographical qualities in many composers. And some even rusticity, like Luca Francesconi. He said, no, I can never write for the trumpet because Miles was too strong, and those days of my life, I'm not sure I want to remember them and all that, you know. And then finally it still happened, and it's called hard pace, and it is, you know, it's painful to play also, but a very, very strong piece.
As is the Zimmerman, which you're playing right now. That definitely comes out of his personality. Could you talk about that piece and the importance of it that in the repertoire?
Well, hugely, hugely important, because I would say, you know, if we talk about concertos only, I would say that Zimmerman is the masterpiece after Haydn, in time, 1954. And for him, it was a big failure. He was commissioned a piano concerto, but had this idea of a trumpet concerto. And he wanted to bring together on a humanistic level things that we think cannot coexist.
Yeah.
You know, and he was thinking of racial trouble, and sadly, this piece remains, you know,
Relevant.
relevant is the word. And so he took the choral prelude, he took 12-tone system, he took elements of jazz, and put them in a mix. And the premiere was a disaster. And he wrote to his friend Hartmann and said, "Oh, it all sounds like my grandmother," you know, and because the jazz players couldn't understand the academic notation, the other players didn't, you know, as soon as they thought it was jazz, they would lose the discipline, and it is, each time I work this with an orchestra and a conductor, is striking that balance between the academic and the, in those days, commercial modern influence. But it is so strong. Each time I play that last note, you know, every second time I feel hope, every second time I feel despair.
Well, continuing the conversation about composers, and this is a theoretical one. If you had a time machine and you had three composers you could ask to write something for the trumpet, who would they be? And I thought about that question because of this old Phillips recording of you with the.
Yeah. Only three.
Make it more. 5? However many you want.
Oh, God. Well, Stravinsky for sure. Alban Berg for sure. Debussy for sure. Bernstein for sure. Beethoven for sure. Bach could get a second try.
Yes.
Yes.
Something that involves less aspirin.
Have you heard the Stephen Mackey?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Oh, it's a wonderful piece. And now there is a thought for Harrison Ford. So once you've jumped once for the Brandenburg, and then you have to climb back up and jump again.
If you were to think back about your decades of performing, and I was going to ask you if there are any performances that stand out, one for two reasons. One, for comedic value, and another for profound value.
Oh, God. I mean, I would have to say playing the Gruber with the Berlin Philharmonic some years back was, in a way, it really felt, it sounds a bit silly, but it felt like an achievement. I was going there with piece written for me, the trumpet an outside soloist, trumpet player, there, and the way they played it, and Andres conducting, and they, I thought they would, oh, difficult modern piece, and that they wouldn't like it, and they really loved it, and they dug into it, and that for sure was one that I often talk about, or I mean mention when I get this question. But in a way, it's very unfair to single something like that out. But and I think probably one of my, that might be a gift actually, that I don't think a lot about. I mean, I will use them in my, when that war is going on between self-confidence and no self-confidence. I might use them as positive triggers,
Yes.
Thinking of that situation, and will help me. But it would be silly to sort of just walk around and remembering, oh, that was so nice when so I try to think of the next concert as the most important one, of course. Comedic values, I'm too boring for that.
I was going to guess the Muppets when you were younger on the.
Yes, they was, what rested with me from that experience was their skill. I mean, those people, there were two people operating this puppet, one doing the head and one hand, and then the other one crawled around in the dress of the puppet doing the other hand. So, and they would show off when they had a break. They will, I would talk to this puppet as it was. I'm very naive, so they were so skillful, and I'm naive. I started to believe in it in 2 seconds. And they would, in the break, they would show off and peel an orange, with those two hands from different people. And it was the skill that remained. The professionality and the skill that they showed, I think, was very inspirational.
Well, for the people who don't know what we're talking about, could you tell what that was just a little bit?
Yeah, it was a side. It wasn't the Muppet Show itself. It was the Jim Henson production, and it was called The Ghost of Fafnir Hall, and it was centered around music. So there was all these musical guests, and I was one of them. Yeah. A very funny situation connected to that was when shortly after that had been made, I was flying over to America, and it was before the days when I could ask for business class tickets. So I was in coach class, and next to me was this all-American family.
Yes.
And we're sitting there eating, and suddenly on the screen comes this episode of the Muppets with me in it. And what should have been filmed is the lady of that family. she had a bit of a fit. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, what upcoming projects do you have that you would like people to know about?
Oh well, we're something that should have been launched last summer is now taking place in Grafenegg in Austria. The Grafenegg Academy, with me and Colin Curry curating it. We will be building a curators team, so we'll be finally, I guess, about 4 or 5 people curating this and taking different amount of responsibility each year, but this is the first year. And the Academy Orchestra, it's very unusual because it's not a student orchestra. The festival already has the European Youth Orchestra resident, and also the Tonkünstler Orchestra, professional Austrian orchestra, is resident. The location is very much like Tanglewood, I would say modeled on Tanglewood, with a beautiful outdoor venue and also several indoor venues. The orchestra is consisting of young professionals, and they're even paid to come there and work, and it's to emphasize motivation for these young professionals, and in many different ways, with repertoire, with ways of thinking and approaching music. So that's going to be a great thing this summer.
Mhm.
And then also doing that, I'll be learning Jörg Widmann's trumpet concerto, which will be premiered. It's a co-commission between the Gewandhaus in Leipzig and Boston Symphony, and it will be premiered during the autumn, September in Leipzig, and November and it's I've got about 15 minutes of it, and it's going to be absolutely sensational. I get shivers just thinking of it. It's so expressive and fantastic trumpet writing and great big orchestra. I'm totally fired up by that piece, I have to say. But I also have to. I'm finally recording the French concertos with the extension of the Tomasi third movement.
Mhm.
I am also, I turned 20 this year, so I'm being celebrated here and there. So I'm artist in residence with the LSO. I'm hopefully going to Japan to the NHK, and I'm going to Berlin Philharmonic again, and Vienna Philharmonic. And so with vaccinations being successful and people taking the vaccine, we might be able to get back to music making again, which I really this week is going to be the first concerts with proper audience for me in a very long time.
Wow. And so, sort of last question, and this deals with the pandemic. What do you think the message has been to the world when we've been shut down and people are dying for music and dying for audiences? What does this show about the importance of music in society? I know it's a big question, but just some kind of thoughts you might have towards that.
Well, first of all, I almost jokingly, but in a way serious also, the day we can play live concerts again, I hope streaming will be forbidden. I mean, it's unfair to say, because there are people in places where it's hard to get to a concert hall, and for that, I shouldn't say that. But for music and music making, it is so vital. I can just see to myself what it does to you when you stand there and play for cameras, and you get obsessed by perfection again. The subject we talked about, and it's like looking at yourself in the mirror, and it's unbearable.
Yeah.
It's not what music making is about. We need the audience, and the audience needs us. And what should happen in places where there are no concert halls is, of course, that people should make music, and there should be a concert hall.
Yeah.
We need to maybe get back to a slightly slower life. I mean, I will think twice about longer travels. I will do them, but I will do them when there is a purpose, not just to fill a calendar or book, or just do it because we can, or blah blah. We should be slower, and we should be creative where we are.
Yes.
The very quick, the internet and what we do now, it has very many advantages, but also a lot of dangers, in that very important things become something that you can just throw away, like knowledge, or human. There's nothing more wonderful than sitting a completely long, you could call it useless, afternoon, and talk to someone who has a lot of things to talk about.
Yeah.
It is one of the most wonderful things to do, and people should do it more often, and play chamber music at home, and little, and that's how, that I would hope would be something we learn. I fear that we will just try to get back to normal as soon as possible. But what should be normal? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just reading this wonderful book by Stefan Zweig about moments in history, Sternstunden. It's called Stellar Moments. I don't know what the title is in English of that book, but it's something to look up, because it talks about very, very decisive seconds.
Yes.
That changes humanity. Why Handel, how he stumbled on writing the Messiah, why Napoleon lost at Waterloo, how the Byzance was taken. Why, and Dostoevsky was not killed. He survived his archivization. So little moments like that are decisive for us on a personal level and on a humanistic level. And if we do everything, I think those moments are in danger of not happening at all.
Yes. Yes. Did your father buying a trumpet when you were very young make it into the book?
Well, not into the book. The book was written already in the 40s, but it's in my personal book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Håkan, hold on a second after we sign off, but I want to just thank you again for this. This is tremendous, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I think every trumpet player and musician has just benefited so much from all that you do, and that you'll continue to do.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure, and good luck with your project.